So to begin the discussion today, the first talk is by Mitchell Adams, who's a Research Associate and Manager from the Centre for Transformative Innovation at Swinburne University. He'll be speaking on the third industrial revolution, 3D printing technology and Australian design for. Mitchell.
Thank you, man, for the introduction, and thank you for arranging today's workshop. What I'm going to talk to you all today, and thank you for coming, is 3D printing and how it interacts with designs law in Australia. It's one of the very neglected areas of intellectual property. Not many people like designs law. It's been called the poor cousin to the patent system, but it holds a very dear place in my heart, something that I've always been interested in since my undergraduate degrees. And so what I'm going to talk to you today is about this third industrial revolution and 3D printing technology in Australian designs law. But I've taken the cue from Matt, and I always wanted to put some sort of pop culture reference into the slides. So what we're really going to do today is really how to get away with designs infringement. Don't encourage it, but I really want to match the font from How to Get Away with Murder. So when we access a lot of products, the traditional sort of method is that we access it through physical or online retailers. And that's how we mostly buy things that we like. But when 3D printing started to emerge, we started to imagine a future where we might not actually see this sort of way to access products. So we're really looking at using a 3D printer from home to actually get these sort of products. But the sort of focus that I want to go through today is, as a base level techie sort of guy with access to 3D printing, how could I potentially use 3D printing without actually necessarily owning 3D printer myself, because I don't necessarily want the burden of having one in my home. So what I'm going to go through today is just a brief overview of 3D printing technologies, the Australian designs right, and the potential futures for designs law as it interacts with 3D printing. So 3D printing, very basic. Most people have probably heard about it by now because it's been all over the mainstream media. So what we have at the top is really 3D printer is using the principles of additive manufacture to create a three-dimensional object. We have 3D computer-aided design programs, which is where designers can actually create three-dimensional objects and schemas to actually plug into the 3D printer. So probably an area I'm not very familiar with. And then 3D scanning as well, which is where we can actually reproduce a physical object into a digital form. So consumer-ready 3D printing. So I want to think about the different ways I could access 3D printing right now, maybe with an infinite amount of cash. So the first sort of way is I could actually own all the materials, all the equipment, probably need a pretty good computer to run some CAD, and actually have the materials to 3D print. That's one way that I could, and that's the sort of the user access to 3D printing. Another way I could sort of dip into 3D printing is also getting involved with some of these online collections of 3D CAD files, which I've done before in the past. And then also another avenue is actually using a third-party 3D print service, where I might source a 3D CAD file from maybe something like Thingiverse, or I might actually just go straight to a third-party provider and print something there. Or I could potentially also 3D scan an existing object and then maybe ask someone to print it off for me. So Thingiverse and Shapeways, for me as a base-level consumer, is probably where I'd always first go to. And so for Thingiverse, this is an online collection of 3D models that can be used either to print at home, or you could actually send them to providers like Shapeways, so they can print it for me. They take the burden out of me knowing any sort of technical know-how or actually storing the materials, and they will print it for me. Australian designs law, so the poor cousin to the patent system. So designs law specifically protects the visual appearance of manufactured products. And in this sense, we have very specific areas of what we provide protection for. So we're looking at the overall appearance of a product. And in terms of those, the appearance, we're looking at shape, configuration, pattern, and ornamentation. But for me, because, and I apologize for the massive amounts of Apple example because I am a Mac fanboy. Design for me is really important because that's how a company will communicate to me. When I'm out in the marketplace, maybe trying to make decisions on what I'm going to purchase, I do acutely look at the design and the aesthetic appeal of a product to make a decision on whether I'm going to buy it or not. So that's what's always drawn me to Australian design law, because it holds a very important place in things like marketing and actual advertisements as well. So Australian design law is governed by the Designs Act of 2003. And what I'm specifically going to look at here is around the infringement provisions around in the Australian Designs Law, which is Section 71. And these are the type of things that you can't do, but we'll get to what you can do when we're looking at how to get away with designs infringement. So we have one primary act of infringement at subsection 2, which is a person infringes a registered design if during the term of registration of the design and without the license or authority of the registered owner of the design, the person makes or offers to make a product in relation to which the design is registered, which embodies the design that is identical to or substantially similar in all proportion to the registered design. So for most people who construct legislation, they're really trying to exhaust you when you're trying to say it in one go. So it is quite a lot there. Underneath the primary infringement to make or offers to make a product, we have things like import such a product into Australia for sale, sells, hires or otherwise disposes of, uses such a product in any way, and keeps such a product for the purposes in a C or D. So these are the main things that you cannot do. So when I'm looking at buying particular products, and here comes some more Apple examples just for overkill, how could I use 3D printing to actually access some of these products without actually buying the original one? So this is the iPad mini case, which probably retails around about $80 or $90, which sometimes is perceived a little bit too expensive, but it's always valuable to have a case on your electronics. This case is a certified design. So in Australia, when we register designs with IP Australia, we can file a design and it goes through a formalities check, and that's when we call it's registered. But when we want to do a substantive examination of the design to see if we actually accrue any legal rights, if it goes through that examination process positively, you'll have a certified right. And this is a certified right for the actual Apple case for the iPad. But if I'm a cheapskate and I really don't want to spend $80 or $90, I actually can go to Shapeways and actually ask them to print this product. So this product sits on the marketplace on Shapeways. So this is a design that is sitting in the marketplace that someone's put on Shapeways, and I can pay to have them printed off, and some of that money goes back to that designer as well. Another example, because I spent probably a bit too much money on the new iPad Pro, I did get an Apple Pencil as well. One of the things that concerned me about the Apple Pencil was the nib at the end. I really thought I was going to lose it, even though there's a magnet inside that's supposed to keep it in place. If I ever did lose that piece, it is a registered certified design. If I ever did lose it, what I could potentially do is I could 3D scan it. One of my colleagues has a 3D scanner that I could utilize for this. I could 3D scan the existing cap for the Apple Pencil, and I could give that to Shapeways to print off. Alternatively, I could go straight to Shapeways and find an existing design for me to get them to print it off. Alternatively, I could get the same design from Thingiverse and send it to Shapeways to print off as well. Another interesting one, which is probably getting a bit older now with the iPhone 4, is this slimline bump case for the iPhone 4 or 4S. It is actually a currently registered US design patent, but I can also find that design on Shapeways to print off as well. So some of the original designers for these products might be a bit concerned that their products are actually ending up on these platforms. So looking at some of the behaviour in more detail and how that interacts with Section 71 of the Designs Act. if I owned all the equipment myself and I decided, yes, I want to definitely reproduce the cap for the Apple Pencil, I would be making the design and I'd be infringing Section 71 of the Act because I'm making a product that infringes an existing registered and certified design. Alternatively, if I went to a service like Shapeways, I could also be infringing the design under Section 71 because some of our cases in designs law actually extends Section 71 to make or offer to make as myself asking another, hey, can you print this for me? I will still be held to infringe that design. Where it gets a little bit more tricky is service providers like Shapeways sit outside of Australia. And some of our cases have actually put on a territorial limit to these sort of infringement provisions. So if I asked Shapeways to print off one of these designs, we'd found that actually that I wouldn't be infringing that existing design because we didn't want to increase this sort of burden when we actually have companies overseas who probably unwittingly is infringing a design. But it wouldn't absolve me from any sort of liability. If I did send it away to be printed, it's got to come back into Australia. So this is where secondary liability comes into a bit more focus. And it is one of the infringing acts to import an infringing article. But bringing it back into the country, importation has to be in a commercial setting. So if I'm doing it just for my personal domestic use, I could actually get away with it. Designers also might actually be a bit more concerned that their actual existing products that someone might legitimately buy is being 3D scanned or reproduced in CAD to then be put onto services like Shapeways. So 3D scanning an object under the Act wouldn't actually be considered infringement. Because for Section 71, subsection 1A, there's a lot of subsections here that I'm getting through, to make is to actually make a product, and a product is defined as something that's actually been manufactured or handmade. So if I'm actually creating a three-dimensional scan of the object, I don't actually have a product. So one of the secondary liability provisions might actually become a bit more relevant, where if you use the product to actually infringe, you might actually be infringing as well. But also, again, that we saw with importation, to use the product, it has to be in a commercial setting as well. So if I'm just at home, decide to scan one of these products that have a registered design, I'd probably still get away with it. And then we have one of these interesting defences under the Designs Act around printing spare parts, so the right of repair defence. So someone can actually get away with infringement if they are reproducing a product that embodies a design that will repair the overall appearance of a product. So this is why I picked the Apple Pencil in particular, is if I lost the cap of the pencil and I 3D printed another one, I'm actually repairing the overall product, which is the Apple Pencil, which is a really interesting scenario. So intermediary behaviour becomes a little bit more relevant here, because if I don't actually own the 3D printing equipment and I'm using providers like Shapeways, those who actually have registered designs want to maybe target those intermediaries who actually may be perceived as facilitating this infringing activity. Probably because Shapeways would have deeper pockets than I would, it's probably not worth their while to go after me. So there's probably two areas here that become relevant, which is the third-party print services, or maybe these areas on the internet where we're actually accumulating those 3D CAD files that people can use either at home or through a provider like Shapeways. One of the interesting things is, and this is brought into the conversation around copyright when it comes to 3D printing, is around this idea around authorization law. And this is what's been used in copyright to target these people who might be perceived as facilitating infringement. Under the Designs Act, we don't actually have a provision that makes it infringement to authorise someone else to infringe a design. So even though in the exclusive rights that's offered to a design owner, they do have the exclusive right to authorise another person to do any of the things authorised in here, which is also to make. It's missing from the infringement provision. So we can't actually rely on authorisation law to actually deal with this sort of problem. Alternatively, people might turn to the common law area of joint tortfeasorship, which is trying to capture these people who might be infringing with another. But the problem with joint tortfeasorship is that you actually need to be acting in a... need to get the words right for this one. You have to be under common design to infringe the registered design. Design is used in way too many different circumstances here. So you need to have a common design to actually, two parties come together, yes, we're definitely going to infringe that design. When it comes to providers like Thingiverse or Shapeways, they're more readily characterised as mere facilitators because providers like Shapeways and Thingiverse, they do provide the tools where there might be infringing and non-infringing activity. So a court's unlikely to find that there's probably joint tortfeasorship there because we don't want to stifle all the other great creative work that's actually occurring on those platforms. So what could happen for designs? So I had a probably blue sky sort of think about what could actually be the response from these design owners about how to tackle these sort of issues. They could possibly ask to have, under the Designs Act, to prohibit 3D scanning of existing products with embodied designs for commercial purposes. So the reason why I brought up this one is that domestic providers such as Officeworks is now offering 3D scanning services, like they do with photocopying as well. So they might be seeing a lot more products coming through that people might actually want to scan, unless you actually want to scan your whole body and make a miniature of your own. Alternatively, they might actually want the digital representation of their designs to be recognised as a right. So under the UK designs law that I've read from Angela's work, there could be a way there to actually recognise rights in sort of digital representations of those actual designs. In a more extreme case, they might actually lobby the government to extend scope of secondary liability to include authorising acts under Section 71. But this seems to be probably very unlikely because patent designs is the poor cousin of the patent system. We don't see a lot of legislative change happening in the design space, so it's very unlikely. The more likely line that we do see is probably self-regulation happening on these online platforms. Shapeways does make money, so they probably have an imperative to sort of watch what's happening. They might get some notices from design right owners to actually take these sort of files down. So they want to secure the money that they do make in their legitimate activities. So we're probably more likely to see self-regulation either by different business models or technical control models, or even just requiring attribution on some of these products as well. Cool. Thank you.